Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Training Grounds, where you will learn how not to be a training dummy in the arena. Let's get started. Today we're going to go over two topics, dual typing and pals with passive buffs in the arena. First up, dual typing. In this screen you can see the basic strength weakness elemental graph. You probably already know by heart, but for this topic I'll keep it around for easier reference. You can also see some additional information in gray that I took from the PAL Professor's website, for which I'll leave the link below. Here, we can see that attacks that are super effective against a specific type show in red, like a headshot had happened. We can also see that PALs are resistant against both same type attacks and attacks from the element they are super effective against, and these numbers will show in gray. It also mentions that dual type PALs can cancel out a weakness and that these numbers will show as white. The table I created here is a basic matrix I'll explain in a moment, but I'll use as a basis for the analysis into dual type PALs. As for the math of it all, it's important to understand it. When we're talking about super effective damage, it means 50% more damage, not double the damage. While when we talk about resisting damage, we're talking about 33% less damage, not half the damage. As for stab, that applies 20% more damage. Now what's real fun is that super effective plus stab comes out to 80% more damage, not 70%. As I mentioned, this math is coming from the PAL Professor's website. You might already know him for his nerdy Excel formula written videos. In this video, I'll be putting these numbers to the test somewhat and see if it all pans out. Next, we're going to take a look at this sample table for a dual type PAL analysis and break it down. Here, we'll have the PALs type 1 and type 2. Here, we can see the damage taken according to those typings. We'll consider their weakness, the same typing, and their strengths. After that, we'll consider the damage they deal with standard type 1 attack, type 2 attack, and neutral damage attack. I chose this as it's a simple yet good way to maximize your damage coverage profile. You can always tweak the attacks a PAL uses to be more focused on a specific type, but this way we can have a good idea of the advantages or disadvantages of a dual type PAL. Next, we're going to be taking a look at the king of dual type PALs, Jarmontide Ignis. Aside from the great stats that Jarmontide Ignis has, it also has a great typing combination, Dragon Fire. Two other PALs share this typing, Blazimet Ryu and Chillet Ignis. But why I highlight Jarmontide Ignis is the fact that he is more balanced towards raw offensive power and bulkiness, with his 130 HP and 130 attack, while Blazimet Ryu has the same overall stats at 105, 130, 125. It doesn't have access to Legend, which significantly reduces its bulkiness. But for now, let's focus on the typing, Dragon Fire. The reason it's so great is because it grants Jigness with just 1 weakness and 4 resists. This means that when hopping over to the arena, it is one of the best PALs in terms of damage profile. When we look at the damage taken side of the table, we see that ice damage, which is Dragon's weakness, actually shows as neutral damage, since we have the protection from Jigness fire typing. Later in the video, you'll see that he actually takes neutral damage. The reason I decided to test this was because the math wasn't clear cut. If stab plus super effective comes out to plus 80%, as we saw, and type resistance is minus 33%, then the Dragon Fire type should take more damage from an Ice type PAL using an Ice move than, let's say, a Dark PAL taking damage from an Ice type PAL using an Ice move. But we'll get to that later. Aside from the protection side, it also has the best offensive side, since Fire is the one element with 2 strengths to its name, and Dragon is super effective to Dark PALs, which is the element with most PALs in the game. These are the reasons why Jarmontide Ignis deserves some serious consideration whenever you're building a PvP team, either as a member of the team, or at the very least as a possible threat you will likely have to deal with. Now let's hop on over to the arena for some quick testing of the math we mentioned earlier. As you may recall, we mentioned that the dual typing of Jarmontide Ignis would counter the Dragon type disadvantage and would make it neutral. Well, now you'll be able to see it. For testing purposes, we're going to be using this Jigness with no defensive passives and a total defense of 666, and a Bella Noir Libero, which has the same defense stats of 100, also with no defensive passives, which will give her in the same situation a total defense of 666. Now we're going to be testing this with the first stallion, which aside from super effective, it also has stab damage. I'd like to thank my friend Bacon for helping out with this testing, and I promise, no pals were hurt too much during testing. Now let's hop on my first stallion so we can do some accurate testing. I feel like a cowboy. Yeehaw! Now let's start with some machine gun damage. Remember, first stallion gives ice type damage to its rider. So my machine gun hits are currently dealing ice type damage. So against German type Ignis, my machine gun is doing an average of 19 damage, as you can see. Now let's try out Belenoir Libero. Literally not cooperating. Here we go. Average of 19 damage as well, with a hot headshot there in the mix. Now let's try using one of her stallion skills to compare the damage he deals. Now Ignis. Bella. And again Ignis. Ooh, a crit. But we can count that out. As you can see, even though mathematically speaking, a Dragon Fire type should take more damage than a Dark type from an Ice type attack, they are taking exactly the same damage. And this means that effectively speaking, resisting a certain element counters being weak to it. And this is why dual types are interesting, and why Ignis is a king of dual type pals. Next up, one of the fan favorites, and was one of my personal favorites, Anubis. As I mentioned earlier, today we'll be testing pals that give passive buffs to the player. And for this, I'm using Anubis as my active pal. This will grant me Earth type damage, which I'll use as super effective damage against Orser. As you can see, my machine gun attacks are dealing super effective damage, and from time to time, you can see a headshot in there. Next, we'll see what happens once Anubis dies. He fought valiantly, but as he dies, I should theoretically lose his passive buffs. But as you'll see shortly, I do not. Even with Anubis dead, I'm still dealing super effective damage to Orser. The question is Anubis bugged? Let's find out. Next, we'll try using Verdash as my active pal. Verdash grants me extra movement speed and grass type damage to my attacks. This we'll test against Anubis, as it's his type weakness. Watch. As you can see, my machine gun hits are dealing super effective damage to Anubis, and I'm moving extra fast throughout the arena. The question is, what happens when Verdash dies? Let's find out. Now when Verdash dead, we can see that Ignis is resisting my machine gun hits, which means that I'm still dealing grass type damage, which is resisted by fire. And to Anubis, I'm still dealing super effective damage. Does this mean Verdash is also bugged? Or is this intentional from Rocket Bear? Or is it something they never actually accurately tested and haven't noticed? I can tell you that I first noticed this while dueling with Felbat, because even though he died, I retained lifesteal throughout the fight. Do all passive buffs work like this? Let me know in the comments below if you've noticed this with other pals, or which passive buff pal you'd like me to test next. If you'd like to know more about a specific topic, leave a comment down below, or you can reach me on my Discord server, where I host polls on what topics to cover next. And remember, only the strong remain. Until next time.